Hello, I'm Daniela. In today's class, we're going to use scrap fabric and scrap thread to make little pieces that we can add to our slow stitching. They're little simple stitches, just repetitive stitches, and not very many of them, unless that's what you want to do. I'll show you my technique for just taking a little scrap of fabric, adding a few stitches, and then I have a bunch of elements to use in my work. Now, one of the reasons I really like this project is because it's very simple. I can use up my scraps, and if I have some inkling or some creative energy I want to use, I can make something very easily. It's a fun little project where if I don't really know where to start something, but I want to do some artwork, this is a great way to do it. So let's get started. So here's a fun project where you can use little scraps, both of thread and fabric, to make a little element that you can add to your slow stitching. It's just a little fabric scrap with a bunch of little X cross stitches. I think it's really cute, and depending on the fabric you use and your color scheme, you get lots of variations. So for example, I'm working on this piece currently. I might want to take a little piece of this element and add it in somewhere, just to add an additional element to my piece. I think it adds a little bit of texture, more contrast, and I'm really pleased with the way I can make a stash of them when I want to use my creative energy, but I don't want to start a big project. Or maybe I want to use my creative energy, but I don't know where to start. So this is a great project for that. So I have 3 simple variations. We'll start with the most basic. You want to start by going through your fabric stash. Sometimes you might even have the exact size you need, or a size that you like that you want to use. And other times you'll have to cut that piece down to size. So for my basic technique, I'm just going to take a little piece of fabric and add some X's to it. So I'm going to take this beautiful fuchsia piece of fabric, and I have some gold metallic thread in my scrap stash. I don't really like working with metallics, even though I think they're very effective. I just think they're finicky. So I start with just that piece of fabric, no backing. I just make sure it doesn't have wrinkles, and I just eyeball where I want to start. And I make a diagonal line. Then I come down at the bottom of that diagonal line and I make another diagonal line. That's it. That's my X stitch. Then I'll skip a little space and create another one. I don't want to pull too tight because the fabric will start to buckle, so I'll just loosen it a little bit. Make a second X, and I can make as many or as few as I want. And then I'll just do one more here. Now if it starts to look wrinkled, after I knot my thread, I will just press it with an iron. But I have a little piece that I can use in my slow stitching. I just combined colors of thread and fabric because I don't have anything in mind. I wanted to use my metallic thread and my little pink scrap of fabric. Now for the next technique, I'm just going to layer 2 pieces of fabric together. They don't have to be perfectly fit. They don't have to have the same edge. It's kind of interesting if they don't, but that's really up to you. And from there, I'm just going to take a little bit of thread and start creating those X's. And I'll speed this along because it's the same procedure of making those X's. Because I have 2 layers of fabric though, it gives me a little more body on the fabric and the stitching, and it's less likely to buckle. So there's my second piece. So for my last technique, I took a wider piece of fabric and folded it over. And this is my little canvas in which to stitch. So I'll start here and stitch up the fabric. Now because I have that double layer of fabric, I have a little more body and it's fun to stitch. But I also have those interesting edges. I have got the one folded edge as well as the edge with the 2 sides. In this case, one is pinked, so it's cut with that little zigzag, and the other one's a raw edge. There's a lot of texture in this piece, and I'm sure I'll use it very effectively in my work. So this one little element adds a lot of interest to my pieces. And the beauty of this is I can customize the colors to go with the exact piece I want. In this case, I'm just making them ahead of time with whatever supplies I have. And that's the last technique. So now if you find that you don't like stitching with a single layer, just put a piece of fabric behind it. This will give you a little more stability. If you don't want to use 2 layers of fabric for whatever reason, you can find some stabilizer. This is non-woven stabilizer. It's not sticky. It feels like paper. It cuts like paper. You just cut it to size, and then you can put it right behind your piece, and it gives a lot of body to your piece and helps you make those stitches nice and neat. So that's another way you can use it. You can also add a layer of batting. So that's how I make these little cross-stitch elements to use in my slow stitching. It's a fun little technique, uses up scraps of fabric, and I can also tailor them to the specific projects. If I use up my scraps of fabric, chances are I'll find some use because those fabrics have already been used, and I really like them, so I tend to use those colors in my work a lot. If you found this video helpful, please give it a thumbs up and be sure to subscribe. Thanks for joining me today.